everyone, and welcome to Bygone Traditions, and today we are going to can some carrots. So the first thing that I like to do is cut up my carrots. Now here I have sliced into rounds, about 25 pounds of carrots here, and over here I sliced into sticks about another 25 pounds of carrots. So in total I have 50 pounds of carrots. The first thing I'm going to can are these rounds of carrots, and they're going in pint jars because I don't use very many of the rounds of carrots at a time. The second thing I will be doing are these sticks of carrots. You can see these here. And these I do use more of, so these will be going in quart jars because I roast them. So I roast these more often as a side dish compared to the rounds. So these will go in quart jars because a quart jar or two is what would feed our family for a side dish. The thing you want when you can are hot jars and a warmish canner that is as warm as the food is in your jar, or as close to it as possible, so you avoid thermal shock on your jars, which is a miserable thing to have happen. That it happened, the bottom usually will crack on the jar and all your food will fall out, and you don't realize it usually until you're done canning, and you just have a big old mess in your canner, and it's not fun. So let me get my jars out, and then I will get some water heated for my lids. I'm using tattler lids today. I will show you how I prepare these for canning as well and how to use them. Okay, so give me just a second. So I've got my jars out, and I wanted to go over real quick the things you need to can. This is very helpful. This is a funnel. I like this funnel because it has the measurements on it. I don't know if you can see that, but it gives me the measurements for filling your jar. So I put this on here and I can fill the jar to the measurement that it needs, whether it's a 1/4 inch headspace, a 1/2 inch headspace, 3/4 inch, or an inch. I have that on here. Another thing you need is vinegar and a clean towel to wipe the rims of your jars because you do not want any food on your jars. One thing I did forget to tell you is when you do put the water in your canner, you want to add about, I would say, a 1/4 cup of vinegar. If you have really hard water, it will keep your jars from getting cloudy, and it just looks nicer on your jars. It keeps your jars clean, they're not cloudy, and that cloudy stuff is kind of hard to get off. You can get it off warm water and vinegar, but it is a little bit of elbow grease. So it is helpful to add that 1/4 cup of vinegar in your canner before you can. A jar lifter is extremely helpful to get those jars out of the canner so you don't burn your hands, and a debubbler. This is really helpful to get any air bubbles out of the jar so you don't have any air pockets that would cause bacteria. And then most of all, you need lids. I use tattler lids because they are reusable and it's just more economical in my thought process. I feel like they're more economical because I don't have to keep rebuying lids. And you also need rings to put on your jars. You need them to keep the lid on, obviously. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to put together these tattler lids before you and what to do with them. So give me just a second, I'll be right back. So I get these tattler lids ready these are brand new in the box, and you just pull them out of the box and you put a ring around it and set it in. So it comes with all these rings, 12 to a box, 12 rings, 12 lids to a box. And you take this rubber ring, the rubber gasket, and put this around here, making sure it's around there, fitting snugly. And then I just place it in the bowl. Once I have all of these placed into the bowl, I then pour hot water over it to get them ready for the canner. And that's all there is to it. Now I need to get my hot water and pour my hot boiling water over this, and it can sit and wait until my jars are full and ready for me to put the lid on. The method I am using today is called the raw pack method. So I will be packing these jars with carrots that are at room temperature. I have not blanched these. You can blanch them, but I prefer not to. It's just an extra step. So that's what I'm doing today. That way and I'm cutting out that blanching step. If you feel like it does do a better job, then you should hot pack those. And when you blanch your carrots, it is hot pack because you are packing hot vegetables into a hot jar. We are just packing the raw vegetables into a hot jar and adding hot water to this to create, to can today. So I'm doing pints right now, and I will pack these and leave a 1-inch headspace, and then I will put my lids on, and I will show you how to put a tattler lid on so that your jar does not have problems in the can. One thing I forgot to mention is you need a ladle to ladle your hot liquid into the jar. You can use your hands or the ladle to put your food in the jar. I prefer using my hands. Okay, so I've got 24 jars, which is all my canner will fit, of carrots here. So now it's ready to fill each of these jars with hot water to 1-inch headspace and then debubble the jars. I almost forgot, I need to put a ½ teaspoon of salt. I am using Himalayan pink salt. You can use any kind of canning salt or this Himalayan pink salt. It does not have any additives to it, so no anti-caking agents are in this. And so it is good to use, and it won't cloud your water. Forgot to show you, we should debubble this as well. And get all the air bubbles out, all the trapped air bubbles, so that no bacteria gets trapped in there. And so there's no displacement of water, because you could need to add a little bit more water after debubbling, which I do in this jar. So I have enough jars to fill the bottom part of my canner. So I'm going to put lids on these jars to make room and then put them in the canner and start on the next 12 jars. One thing you need to get the jars out of the water is tongs. So when I do the tattler lids, I pull them out, and well, before I do that, I do have to clean off the rims, which I completely forgot. Don't forget that, it's very important. So I just dip a clean cloth into the vinegar, and I just wipe the rims off. This gives you a chance to feel for any chips in the top of the jar, in the rim of the jar, and it gives you a chance to clean the rim to make sure there's no food particles on the lid creating a faulty seal. So we're just going to do that with all of these jars, and then I will start putting the lids on. So when you put a tattler lid onto your jar, you want to center it on your jar. I hope you can see this okay. You just want it just fingertip tight. So basically what I do is I put this ring on and I hold it down with my finger, and then I spin it until it spins on the counter. That's as tight as you want it. You do not want it any tighter than that, or it won't seal properly, and you'll have a broken jar. The reason why it needs to be loose is because the air needs to vent out so that it creates a suction so that it seals properly. If it's too tight, the air isn't allowed to release and it creates a bad seal. It can also create a broken jar in your canner. All right, I'm going to get these into the canner and then I will come back and fill the rest of these jars. So I have the rack on top of the jars now, and I am ready to fill the rest of the jars and fill this canner. I have an All-American canner. It is not a dial gauge canner. It does have a dial gauge on it, but that is just a guideline. It's a weighted gauge, so it will tattle, and that's how I know that it's the pressure, that the canner is pressured. So for my altitude, which is under 1,000 feet, I am going to use 10 pounds of pressure, and for the pint jars, it's 25 minutes after it's come up to pressure in the canner. So it will vent for 10 minutes, and then I will put the gauge on, the dial gauge on, and wait for it to come up to pressure. And once it is at pressure, I start the timer for 25 minutes. And once the 25 minutes is up, then I can turn off the canner. I let the canner come down to equal pressure, so it will be at 0. And then I will remove the gauge. And the gauge will stay off, and I let that vent for about 10 more minutes. Then I crack the canner and I let that sit for another 15 minutes. Then I take the lid off the canner and I remove the jar, and you tighten down all the lids, and I will show you that step when we're at that point. Okay, so I'm going to finish filling these, get them in the canner, and get the canner going. So I just noticed on this jar that there is a bubble right here. I don't like that. I don't know if that's going to cause my jar to break in the canner, so I would rather be safe than sorry. So I got a new jar out, and I'm just going to put all of this in here. And poke it around, debubble that. It's good. Cleaned up, and we're all set. I can use this jar now. Instead of using it for canning, I'll just use it for dry goods like herbs and such. Right, I want to show you how I do my lid. So I have this lid on here, centered, and I put my finger on it, and I just spin it just like that. So I do it on the towel because I feel like it's too loose. If I do it on here, it spins a little bit sooner than it would on the towel. Okay, now as you can see, I have a Camp Chef stove in my house. The reason for this is because I have an electric glass top stove, and I cannot use my canner on that stove because it could break the glass. And the electric stove is not a very even heat, whereas the gas stove is much more even. That's why I use this. So I am going to load the rest of the canner up, and I will be right back. Hi everyone, so it's the next day, and I just realized that yesterday I forgot to tell you a very important step. You have this lid for your canner, and you have this venting spout on the lid, and it is extremely important that you check to make sure it is not blocked. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but here's the hole, and you're going to want to point it at a sunny location and look and make sure that it's clear before you start venting, and you will see light shining through that hole and you will know it's clear. Now if it is not clear, you just want to take like a pipe cleaner and stick it in the hole, or just a straight piece of something and stick it in there to clear it out. It's pretty easy to do. I've never had an issue with it, but it is important that it isn't blocked so that you don't have problems with your canner. Okay, I have the canner loaded. I have an arrow on this canner that I line up with this line right here, and I have the gauge off of my canner, and I make sure the gap is even all the way around. So once I've determined that it's even, then I can start clamping down the lid. So now I'm going to turn the heat up and wait for this to start venting. Once this starts venting, and you will see a stream of steam coming out of this, and it will be a little bit loud as well. Once that's venting, you let that go for 10 minutes, and only 10 minutes, and then you take your gauge. Now I am below 1,000 feet, and so mine is going to be at 10, and I will just pop this on here once it's ready. So I wait for this to vent, and then it vents for 10 minutes, and then I pop the gauge on and then let the pressure regulate. And once it's at 10 pounds of pressure, so that would mean this is tattling at least 4 tattles a minute, and over is okay. You just don't want it to be too much over, or else this will just fall off and you'll lose all your pressure and you have to start over. Okay, we are at a full vent. So I am going to start the timer now for 10 minutes, and then I will put the gauge onto the spout. Okay, so this has been venting for about 10 minutes now, so I'm going to go ahead and pop this on at 10 pounds. Just like that. And there we go. Now we just wait for it to start tattling a little bit, and then we'll start our timer once it's at 4 tattles a minute. Okay, so we're at 10 pounds of pressure. It's rattling pretty good, so we're going to just turn this down. I turned it down. I have noticed on my camp stove that right around low, like right where the L is on the low, is where this sits nicely for the canner. And if it's still going too much, I'll just adjust it slightly, just ever so slightly, and then give it a few minutes and listen and see if it slows down. So this is rattling right about where I want it. So I'm going to set my timer for 25 minutes, and I will get back to you when this is done. Okay, so this has been going for 25 minutes now, so now we can just turn off the burner and let this come down to 0 pressure, and then we will remove the weighted gauge. So we are just about ready to take this gauge, this weighted gauge, off of here. You don't want to disturb that while you're waiting for it to come down to pressure at all. Now I have this glove because sometimes the gauge is hot, and I'll also use these gloves when I am pulling the jars out of the canner. It just saves me from getting burned. So this gauge, I don't know if you can see it right there, it's just about down to, well, I think it's there. It's touching the metal thing. It is down to 0 pressure, so we are ready to pull this gauge off. There it is right here. We're going to pull this off and let this vent for 10 minutes. So this has been sitting for about 10 minutes, so I am ready to take this lid and crack it. So I'm going to unscrew these. this is I just turn it and set it and let it sit. And I'm going to let that sit for another 15 minutes. Okay, so now we are ready to remove the lid and take out the jars. Always remove the lid away from you. So when you open it, make sure that it goes away from you so the steam goes away from you and you do not burn yourself. Okay. So as I remove these, I take it out and I just tighten the lid down. So I pull them straight out of the canner, set them down, this is in the way, sorry, and tighten these lids down. Okay, I'm going to remove the rest of the jars and finish up my cleaning. With your jars, you want to make sure there's about a 2-finger width space between the jars so they can cool evenly. I've got all of my jars out of the canner. So here's all 24 jars from the first batch. I have another batch, which are quart-sized jars in the canner right now. There are 19 quart-sized jars. I'm just waiting for that to vent, and then I will have that done, and then I have one more batch to do after that. I don't know if you can see that way down there. But as soon as all of these are done, I will pull them out of the canner, and then tomorrow morning I'm going to come back and show you the rest of what I do with them. And that will be it. So see you tomorrow. It's the next day, and here are all the jars that I was able to get canned. I was able to can 34 pints and 22 quarts, which I think will be good for us for the year. That we don't eat a ton of carrots, but we do eat quite a few. So these have been sitting out for about 18 hours. And they're completely cooled down to room temperature, which is where you want them. So I'm going to show you how to take care of these after they've come to room temperature, and what I do with them and how I label them. So take the lid off and you check to make sure the seal is good. The seal is good on this, so that's great. So now you can wash this off. I wash this off under the sink. I use a sponge and clean that lid off, clean all of the junk off, and make sure there's nothing sticky or anything on this, because the last thing you want is anything getting into your canned goods like ants or anything like that. So it's nice to have it all nice and clean. So once it's clean, I dry it off. And then I have got a marker, and this is a chalk marker that I bought at the store. Let me just turn you around here. I got it at Michael's. It's called Craft Smart. I don't know if you can see that. And I use it to label the top of my tattler jars. These wash off nicely, but they don't come off without water. So what I do when I label it, and I will write carrots, and then I put the month, which is the 5th month, and the year, which is 2022. So my labels will look like this, and then it's ready to store. Every once in a while I will have a jar that doesn't seal, so usually you can tell right away. The seal came off on this one. This did not seal properly. Now it could have been a myriad of things. I may not have had this tightened down enough after it came out of the canner. The ring may have not been screwed on here properly when I put it in the canner. I may not have filled it properly, so it didn't vent all the way. Therefore, the seal didn't seal all the way. It could have siphoned out, and had some kind of food on the ring that kept it from sealing. There's a myriad of things that can happen when a jar does not seal. So this one obviously didn't seal. I will probably stick this in the fridge. If I had, I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 jars that didn't seal and it had been before the 24-hour mark, I would go ahead and just reprocess these in the canner and see if I could get it to seal. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope to see you on the next one.